So I know it's still only October and the clocks have gone back, I suppose. But I was walking through Westfield the other day, I think it was Wednesday or Tuesday, and I was there because I was looking for some colouring pencils. I fancied doing some drawing, so I thought I'm passing through, I'll see if I can get some colouring pencils at Westfield. They didn't have the pencils I wanted though, so I didn't get any. However, when I got to Westfield, something happened to me. I started to get that buzz. You know what I mean? It's Christmas, at least to the shopping centres anyway. Now I know, as Catholics, we're not allowed to get excited about Christmas or start preparing for it until the first Sunday of Advent. But the minute I came through that ticket barrier and saw the advert for Gran Turismo, the new PlayStation game, all the Christmases of yesteryear started to come back to me. I started to remember some of the best Christmas Day presents. First of all, there was my little Nintendo Donkey Kong when I was 6 years old. That was swiftly followed by Zoidzilla, the robot Tyrannosaurus Rex. Followed by the Game Boy, one of my best presents. And then finally, Hero Quest, which is one of the best ball games I've ever played. But the best Christmas present I've ever got, I think actually only got a couple of years ago. And it's actually what I'm wearing on my wrist right now, just here. And that is my Fitbit. Now, my brother Michael got this for me from Father Christmas, from Santa, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Christmas 2015. Now, that was, if you remember, the Christmas that I wasn't with you. I've been away from here for about 2 months. And at that point in my life, I had no prayer, no mass, and no parish family with me. I was playing, at the time, I'll admit, quite a bit of FIFA on the PlayStation, and I'd taken up the gym. See some kids play FIFA here. I'd taken up the gym, but it was a 2-mile walk away, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I thought, well, I'm going to walk there. And my brother noticed this, and somehow he instinctively knew what kind of Christmas present he was going to get me, because he knows something about me. He knows a lot about me. First of all, he knows that I'm very competitive, and that there's no game that I won't try to turn into a contest, and I always count. I always keep score. I'll give you an example. Growing up, I've been a member of the American Pool and Snooker Club in Upton Park for over 20 years now, since I joined sixth form. And I used to go with a close group of friends who are still my friends now. I found a photo of them yesterday. That's us at the pool club. You know, sir, I haven't got any hair. That's my preferred haircut. And when we're there, even if there's 6 or 7 of us on multiple tables, they can, even after 3 or 4 hours of playing, they can just turn to me and say, Jimmy, that's what they call me, not what you call me. Jimmy, what's the score? And I'll be able to tell them, because I've been counting the whole night, what the scores are between each individual, what the overall score is, and how well I'm doing. If I'm not winning, I don't tell them. But I know it. But that might be weird. That's a bit of a weird side of my competitive nature. It also has an ugly side. I'm quite a big table tennis fan. I used to play a lot of table tennis while I was at seminary. And I was okay, but there was one lad who was better than me. So I focused all my energies into practicing so I could beat him. I worked on my backhand, I worked on my forehand, everything. And I kept challenging him, kept thrashing me, but every time I got that little bit closer, until we got to a match where it was 3 sets all, final set, and I was winning 20-19 in the final set. I had match point. I got nervous, and I lost 22-20. And when that final point went out, I lost it. I got my bat instinctively and threw it at him. That's the ugly side of my competitive nature. But my brother knew something. He knew that this would give me enjoyment. I like to count, I like to compete. And this Fitbit helped me count my steps, and also because the app has a bit where it shows you what everyone else is doing, I could compare myself to all my friends who had Fitbits in my phone book. Now, on Christmas Day, this Christmas Day 2015, I was pretty miserable. I was in the congregation in Woolwich, in a church there, and I was watching the priest say Mass, and I was like, man, what has my life come to? Here I am. I should be up there, with my people. So I was pretty miserable, except for one moment, and that's when I walked out of the church and I checked my Fitbit, and I said, 3,000 steps. And then I noticed someone else on my Fitbit data who had 10,000 steps, and I knew her. And she was a nurse. So I said to myself, oh, it's because she's a nurse. She's got 10,000 steps because she's working today and she's walking around the hospital. That's why she's beating me. But the juices have begun to flow, because the next day I went out for a walk and I had 4,000 steps. Then the next day after that I had 5,000. And by the middle of February 2016, I was averaging 25,000 steps a day. I was literally walking anywhere. If someone needed a loaf of bread, I'd say, I'll get it, just so I could get some more steps. It got so bad that at the end of days, just to beat the day before, Mum would see me like this. I'd be doing like this. James, what are you doing? I'd be like, oh, nothing, Mum, nothing. I was counting my steps, trying to break the record. So it was pretty sad, but I was the king of the walkers. But something else was happening to me on those long walks, on those long days. I was walking like 15 miles a day. The walking was helping me to pray. I couldn't pray at home. I couldn't go to church during the week. But when I walked, I began to think and I began to listen to God. I had an app on my phone which enabled me to listen to the Bible, read by David Suchet or Poirot. And to fill that time, that's what I do. And then one day I was listening to the story of Joseph. We all know the story of Joseph and his brothers. And it got to the point where Joseph has his chance for revenge. Remember, they betrayed him. And now they come to him in their need, in their weakness. And he doesn't get the revenge. Rather, he weeps out of love for them, forgives them, and gives them from his abundance. And it made me cry. Because somehow in that moment, I thought, that's how God the Father loves me. It moved me. So through all this walking, because of this Fitbit, I was learning to pray again. I was learning to feel the love of God my Father again. I realised that even though I was a mess, God still loved me. That was the end of February. And I thought to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go for a really, really long walk. So I decided to walk from Lourdes to Santiago de Compostela. To walk, to pray, but also to break some records. But at that point, it had been 6 months since I'd said Mass. And I hadn't wanted to say Mass. I wanted to be on my own. But on this pilgrimage, after a few days' walk, I picked up my first companion, Dan. And then after another few days, I picked up my next companion, Rasmus. And by the end of the first week, I was walking with a group of about 6 or 7 people. The group kept growing. It got to April the 4th, which was my brother Bobby's anniversary of his death. And a thought occurred to me. I've never not said Mass for my brother Bobby on his anniversary. So what am I going to do? There was a church in a place called Roncesvalles, just over the Pyrenees. And I thought, I'll sneak in, I'll speak to the old Spanish priests who are there, and they'll let me celebrate Mass. But with old priests, they always, if a young priest comes in, they're like, no, you do the Mass, you do the Mass, you do the Mass. And I said, no, I'm just going to sit in the corner here with a stole on and can celebrate. And I thought I'd get away with this and no one would notice, because none of the people on the pilgrimage with me were religious. So I thought, they're not going to come to Mass. I can celebrate Mass and go back and no one will know. However, they were tourists. So halfway through the Mass, about 6 or 7 of them were walking in, and they're like, I could see them going, wait, is that James? So I thought, oh gosh, I've been busted. So I get back to the hostel, and we're eating food, and they're like, James, they didn't know it was Mass. They're like, what were you doing up there? I was like, well, I'm a priest. And they were like, oh wow, that's so interesting. So they start plying me a question. What's it like to be a priest? Priests do this, priests do that, blah, blah, blah. And it meant, for the next couple of weeks, all I was doing was talking about Jesus. They were asking me questions about Jesus. They were asking me about the lives of the saint. And all I could do was talk about Jesus. And you know what? I began to like it again. Actually, I began to love it. And I began to feel the love of Jesus through these people asking me. And so what happened? I had my prayer back, and I began, day by day, to start saying Mass again. Until by the time I got to Santiago, I was celebrating Mass every day. All because of this Fitbit. I had the love of my Father. I had the presence of Jesus back in my life. However, I still had records to break. Now, I worked out, when I got to Santiago, if I walked 3 more days to a place called Finisterre, which is on the coast, I'd have exactly, get this number, 1,000 kilometres walked. because the Fitbit also records distance, which was awesome, and also meant that I would have been walking further than anyone else who I'd met on the pilgrimage. So I let Rasmus and Dan come with me because they'd been walking a bit less. But on the last day, I said to them, lads, I'm going to walk to the coast on my own. And I got to the coast, I watched the sunset over the horizon, and as I walked back, I thought to myself, I want to go back to my parish. So I wrote to Bishop Allen as soon as I got in, and I asked him if I could return. 6 days later, he phoned me. You know when he phoned me? On the vigil of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came. I was actually peeking my head around the door of the cathedral back in Santiago, and he called up and he said, James, I've got your letter. When would you like to come back to the parish? So at that point, I was dumbfounded because I thought, this Fitbit had given me back my prayer, the love of my Father. It had given me back the Mass and the presence of Jesus. And now, at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit had come, it gave me back my people, you guys. Now, if you'd have asked me how I planned to make my return, like what was the roadmap back to active and happy ministry, I wouldn't have picked what I considered to be one of my biggest weaknesses. I can be, as I've just said, a very horrible competitor. And yet somehow it had been redeemed for this purpose. Because God can literally turn anything around to his purposes if we give it to him, if we surrender it into his hands. In today's gospel, though, the Pharisees seem to be struggling with that idea just a little bit. Because they asked Jesus the question which, if you asked any Jew today, for example, what is the greatest commandment in the law, they'd kind of look at you, a bit like this. I found this online. What do you mean? Everyone knows the answer to this question. What's the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus kind of answers them. It's like, well, it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But notice what else it says in the gospel today, which I think gives you an understanding of why they're asking it. It says they asked the question to disconcert Jesus. They made so many rules and regulations around this commandment that they were trying to define what one had to do to achieve love. They were basically asking Jesus not what the greatest commandment was, but what is your technique? What is the best technique? What is the minimum I have to do? It's very focused on the individual, what I'm going to do to help me get to heaven. But when Jesus answers this question, he's thinking about everyone. He's thinking about the whole family of Israel. In fact, he quotes this commandment from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And that chapter starts with Moses speaking to the people. And here's what he says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. He's speaking to all the people together. He's saying, together as one family, we will love God with our collective hearts, souls and minds. Only together can we make this love of God present in our own lives, and only can we experience it and pass it on to others in this way. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all answer to this. Only by sharing these gifts with one another, being strong where another person is weak, and allowing our weaknesses to be exposed so that other people might be strong for us, do we love God as he deserves. And that's why the second part of the commandment that Jesus quotes is so important. In fact, it's key to understanding the first part. He says, you must love your neighbour as yourself. Because I can't, no one can, love God in the abstract. I can't sit down and just think, love. It doesn't work. We love with our guts. We choose love with our hearts. And we plan and execute it with the help of our minds. But it's always in relation to living things and to real people. That's how God wants to be loved. That's how he wants us to love one another. He wants that love for us all. I mean, look at how God acts in the first reading. He shows his own heart and where his love lies. Listen to what he says. I mean, I'm just quoting from the reading here. In fact, sometimes I think some of these readings that children will be a bit spooked out. I'm going to say it. He says in the first reading today, if you're harsh with the widow and orphan, I'm going to be so angry, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to widow you and make your children orphans. Now we might be thinking, oh God, just slow down, take it easy. But what's he showing with that passion? He's showing that his passion and his heart is for the vulnerable and the weak. God leads with his heart. He can't help himself. You pick on the weakest and I'm going to be mad. He loves with his heart. But his heart isn't enough all on its own. It has to be acted upon and directed if it's to have effect. That's why in the rest of that reading, he talks about and spends the rest of his time directing people how they're to go about their affairs. Because this love of the heart in here, it takes place in a real world where organisation, planning and tough decisions are needed. Passions, or our heart, needs guidance and direction of the mind and the soul. But the mind and the soul depend on the heart, on the feelings, for their sense of purpose. Now that means when it comes to loving God, we're all in this together. Because none of us is strong in all areas of life. For example, much of what makes me me is the stuff of the guts. It's the stuff of the heart. You know, one minute I want to run a homeless shelter and I say, oh, who wants to run it with me? And everyone goes, hey! And I want to connect people. Or I want to run a marathon for charity. But on my own, none of that stuff happens. Because, as you probably know, I'm also horribly disorganised. I'm terribly organised. You only have to ask Sister Ruth. She's always like, oh, Father. I don't know if she's here or not. I need someone to say to me, yeah, but James, how are you going to do that? I need someone to say, and I'm going to help you organise it. Someone with a different gift. Because then that energy is directed energy. It's passion with a purpose. Leave passion on its own to do everything, and you've got a mess like me. But passion put into the hands of someone with a strategic mind, with an organised mind, then we've got power. God made me, and God made you, exactly the way we are for a reason. You, and everything that makes you you, are geared for his mission. Even the things you don't like about yourself, you know what? God likes them about you, and he loves them about you. All he needs is to let his light shine on it and see the change. Now, don't know what's happened there. That one's for later. Okay, so, remember you were here last week when Father James Mallon was here? Yeah? And what a great mass that was. Now, he'd just been leading a conference in St Mary's Strawberry Hill on church renewal, which I'd been part of. And he asked to come and stay with me over the weekend. But at this conference, when I was chatting to him, I noticed something. I noticed that he was wearing a Fitbit. So we were chatting, and I just saw him check it. I wasn't looking. I saw him checking. But as the screen came up, I saw 5,000 steps. So I kind of turned around and looked at mine, and I noticed that I had 10,000 steps. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so I thought to myself, I'm winning. I'm beating Father James Mallon. So later that day, he came back to mine and we went out for dinner with another priest, and we took the scenic route home, so I took him for a walk around the dock because I wanted more steps. And I sort of slyly said, oh, you've got a Fitbit on. How many steps have you done? And he checks his Fitbit, and it said 15,000. I'm like, no, that's not bad. Let me check mine. I checked my Fitbit, and you know what it said? 14,900. So we're talking, he continues the conversation. I'm like, yeah, we're talking away. And after a couple of minutes, we got to the crossing in the road, just where the red light was up. And I still can't believe I said this. I was like, I've worked it out. The reason you've got more steps than me is because you're small and I'm big. So that means I have a bigger stride than you because you need to take more steps. And he just kind of smiled at me. And he just said, and I remember it sticks in my head, he said, James, it can be redeemed. And you know what? He was dead right. When my competitiveness is used in that way, it can be at best, more than a bit embarrassing. At its worst, it can be quite destructive. But place it in the hands of God, and man, it can be powerful. Shared with people who have different gifts, who can take the ball that I throw and land it on the spot, that's winning. Not winning against, but winning for God. Winning for our neighbour. And that's what we're here to do. There's a reason that we have a parish purpose that we spoke of last week. Purpose is all that we have bundled together and organised to meet God's own purpose, his own vision here in this place, to grow this family of disciples, united together by Jesus' mission to make God's love known. So whatever it is that you've got, whatever it is that is you, hold it before God's loving smile. If you love children, we can use it here. If you're good at maths, we can use it here. If you're good at administration, I can definitely use it, that's for sure. If you've got an extensive stamp collection and that says something about your heart and passion, you know what? We can even use that here. A strength in isolation, that's a weakness. But a weakness shared with others, that's a strength for all. How do we love God and neighbour? Jesus keeps it very simple. It's you and me together on mission. Now that's a perfect fit and a great win. Amen. Amen.